Okay, today's lecture is on the muscular system again. We're going to focus on the structure and a little bit of the function of skeletal muscles. Our main goal will be to identify superficial muscles, their attachments, and their actions. Most of this material will be for the lab and will be tested on in the second lab exam, not in the next lecture exam. Okay, so we're talking about muscles as organs. And muscles have some characteristics. They are contractile, they are excited by nerve cells. Muscles can be extended and are elastic, but they don't do that forcefully. When muscles function, when skeletal muscles function, they produce movement generally by pulling on the attachments that they have to the skeletal system. But sometimes muscles contract to hold things in position. These are the muscles of posture, and so posture is an important component of the muscular system and takes lots of effort. Skeletal muscles are also used to move air into and out of the lungs. That's ventilation. As a byproduct, all skeletal muscles produce heat. That's involved in temperature regulation. Certain skeletal muscles, those of the head and face, some of the postural muscles, can communicate other individuals about our feelings and how we're doing. And other types of muscle produce movement inside the body. The heart and smooth muscle or of organs can produce movement in the blood and the digestive tract and things like that. When we talk about muscles as organs, we also have to recognize that they contain more tissues than just skeletal muscle tissue. Muscles contain lots of nerves, blood vessels, and they contain lots of connective tissue. Each skeletal muscle cell is surrounded by an endomysium. That little bit of connective tissue allows it to move relative to its neighbors. Groups of cells are bundled in a slightly thicker connective tissue called a paramysium. If those groups of cells contract together, they're generally in the same bundle of paramysium and might be this part of the same motor unit. And then entire muscles have connective tissue wrapped tightly around them called the epimysium. This connective tissue around and in the muscle cell in the muscle is not so thick in the belly of the muscle, the part where we can see the skeletal muscle cells, but it gets more and more predominant as you move towards the end. And these are the attachments are just connective tissue, and these are generally tendons, generally strap-like. And so there you see the tendons of the biceps. The origin ones are attached to the scapula. The insertion are attached to the radius. In the center part, what looks to be like fibers are actually the skeletal muscle cells. And in the thickest part of this area is referred to as the belly. And the thicker that is, the stronger the muscle is. And so this cross-sectional area, this tells you how much force the muscle has when it can contract. Okay, so the attachments, the origin and insertion are defined by which end moves when the muscle contracts. And so in the biceps brachia then, the two heads that attach to the scapula are generally not moving when the muscle contracts, and so are referred to as the origin. And the attachment at the radius, when the muscle contracts, that allows the arm to flex, that produces lots of movement, that's the insertion. Muscles that cause the same movement are called agonists. In the case of the biceps brachia, it has a couple agonists with it. The brachialis and bradiobrachialis, not shown here, are also agonists. They produce the same movement. Sometimes they're termed synergists, but the biceps brachia is the prime mover. It's the strongest, the muscle most responsible for flexing the elbow. Whenever a muscle moves something, generally there's other muscles that work at the same time that don't have the same action. Often these stabilize other parts. And so like when the biceps brachia moves, there's a bunch of fixators that hold the scapula in position. So those also work with a prime mover. Agonists, on the other hand, work in opposition to the antagonists, work in opposition to the agonist. Here the opposition, the muscles in opposition are the like the triceps brachia. So let's look at that. Here you see the biceps, the head of the biceps. That's the origins. You see the insertion on the radius. And then on the opposite side of the arm is the triceps. That's the antagonist. Okay, and so the antagonists are right there. Okay, so then we're going to go over some individual muscles and their names. These muscles, now we've known the names of the bones, we've got the names of the body regions, then the directions. Muscles are usually have names that kind of say something about them. And so the muscle may say about where it is on the body region. So like the pectoralis is on the pectoral region. The biceps brachia is on the arm. Sometimes it might say something about the size. Lots of times there are groups of muscles where there are several of the same size. So we have maximus, medius, minimus, major, minor. Sometimes it's about length, longus, brevis, but lots of times that term is in the name of a muscle. Often the name of a muscle is just the names of the insertions. They get closer together, so it's worthwhile to name the muscle after the two parts that it's attached to. We sometimes name muscles by the shape of the muscle: deltoid, quadratus, teres. These are terms that refer to a triangle, a square, or a round. And so we have lots of muscles like that. Rectus, we use the term rectus to indicate the fibers run straight along a bone or straight along a body line. We use the term oblique to say that they run at an angle. Biceps and triceps, those refer to heads. And then we often have functions. We'll talk about flexors, extensors, abductor, adductors. Those are all muscles, names that we commonly have in muscles. Sometimes the action might be something like chewing, and so then it's masseter. So when you're trying to learn the names of these muscles, it's helpful to realize, it often tells me what it looks like or where it's attached to or what it's doing. Okay, so muscles of the head and neck. These are muscles of facial expression, muscles involved in chewing. And so here we've got a lateral view of the head. You can see some of these important muscles. Let's see, the orbiculus or oculi, you have to know. This is the muscle that closes the eye, produces a wink-like motion. You have to know the masseter, a really big muscle on the side there involved in chewing. The buccinator, like when you blow, the buccinator contracts. Here it shows the zygomaticus minor and zygomaticus major. I just say zygomaticus for these. This attaches to the corner of the mouth, and it's used in smiling, and it's, of course, attached to the zygomatic bone. Orbiculus oris. Orbiculus means round, circle. Orbiculus oris goes around the mouth, and it puckers the mouth. And so you can see that when a person is like making a kissing type motion with their mouth. And here you can see two muscles that move the head that are important. The sternocleidomastoid, which goes from the sternum and the clavicle, so that's the sternocleido part, and it goes to just behind the ear to a part of the temporal bone called the mastoid. And this is used to turn the head. So there's one on either side, and so when you contract one, it turns the head. When you contract them both, it pulls the head down. And then another muscle you have to know here in the side view is the splenius capitis. So it's going to the head, attaches to the occipital region, and comes from some vertebrae, and it pulls the head back. And so it's the antagonist of the sternocleidomastoid and an important postural muscle. Okay, so I think that's what we can see here really nicely. Here's a frontal view of some of the same muscles. You can see the zygomaticus, the masseter, the buccinator, the orbiculus oculi, the orbiculus oris. You can also see the depressor anguli oris. This is to pull the corner of the mouth down, like when you make certain facial expressions, like you're uh, you're pained or you're frowning, things like that. Also, I think the levator labii superius, which pulls the mouth up, like when you're grimacing or when you're making certain expressions like contempt or anger. Okay, and we can see these muscles in some cases just when we make these expressions. And so here we have a guy that's smiling, and the zygomaticus major is pulling the corner of the mouth up. There's also muscles active on the other muscles that you don't have to know that are active that move the eyes. And so I've talked about real smiles and fake smiles. And the real smiles are not just zygomaticus, but they involve changes in the eyes. And so you see two smiles there. And then you see some other expressions there on the bottom, and you can see some of the muscles that are active there on those other expressions. And so I've talked about like psychologists, and well, they train people to identify certain facial expressions to when they're interviewing them for in intelligence work and screening people like at the airports and border crossings. Okay, so then let's move on. Muscles of the abdominal wall and the thorax. Here, most of this, you can see muscles of the abdomen, the rectus abdominis. Rectus means going straight down the abdomen. This is the six-pack muscle, or really I think there's more like an eight-pack there. But this is covered by a dense layer of fibrous connective tissue, and it's divided by connective tissue so that this one long muscle that goes from the pubic bone to the sternum and helps us do a sit-up or compresses the abdomen looks like it's actually several ridges, and these are because of these tendons, fibrous tendons that divide it. And so you can see this muscle. And then to the lateral side of the abdomen, you have three layers of muscles: the external oblique, the internal oblique, and then the transverse abdominis. These muscles all, again, are muscles of the abdomen. They are running in different directions, and they're muscles that all compress the abdomen, but they also can help us in twisting motions. And so like when we do a twisting sit-up or we turn to one side, these muscles help us. And when I say sit-up motion, I should really kind of qualify this. This is really flexing the spine, and so important that way. Then above these muscles of the abdomen, you can see portions of several other muscles. You can see portions of the serratus anterior. This is a muscle that attaches the scapula and pulls the scapula forward. You can see a little bit of the latissimus dorsi. This is a muscle that goes to the humerus and attaches to fascia on the spinal cord, and it can pull the humerus down. And so you can see little bits of that there. You can also see the pectoralis major, a little bit of that. And so let's go to the next image of that. The pectoralis major covers much of the thorax surface. It's going from the sternum and ribs to the humerus. It's involved like moving the humerus like when you do a push-up. Okay. Underneath it is the pectoralis minor, and it partially covers the serratus muscles, and its attachment is also partially covered by the deltoid, which is going from the scapula to the humerus. The deltoid is involved in abducting the humerus. And so a complex series of overlapping muscles that you can see there. Okay. Then muscles on the back of the thorax. There's a big muscle that's cut away here on the right side, but you can see on the left side. That's the trapezius, which means it makes like a trapezoid. And it goes from fascia along the vertebrae and to the scapula, and then to the fascia along the cervical vertebrae. And this can be used in a couple ways. It can be used to elevate the shoulders or fix the shoulders in position. And it can also be used with the splenius capitis to pull the head backwards. And so depending on what other muscles are fixed, it can have different actions. So those are the two major muscles that you have to know there on the superficial part. On there on the with the superficial cutaway on the right side, you see the splenius capitis nicely. Okay, and then here we have a nice picture of the upper part of the arm. Okay, you will know the deltoid. The deltoid attaches from the spine of the scapula and the clavicle all the way onto the humerus. It's used to abduct the humerus. Below that, you can see the biceps brachia on the front part of the arm and the triceps brachia on the posterior part of the arm. Okay. I think you also have to know the brachialis. The biceps brachia, brachialis, and brachioradialis are all agonists. They flex the elbow. The triceps brachia is an antagonist to those. It extends the elbow. And so those are large muscles on the arm. Here again, you can see the biceps with the deltoid cut away. And so that's nice. You can also get a view of the triceps a little bit. And then below there, you can see an arm with where you can see the muscles through the skin, and then a dissected arm. So quite nice. So we'll concentrate on those three: triceps brachia, biceps brachia, and brachialis. Okay, then moving to the muscles of the pelvic girdle and the lower limb. Okay, so then here is a posterior view of the pelvic girdle. On the one side showing the superficial muscles on the left, on the right side showing the deep muscles. Really here all you have to know is the superficial muscles, which are the gluteus maximus and I think possibly the gluteus medius. These have attachments on the pelvis and sacrum and are attaching to the humerus on the greater trochanter and lesser trochanter, and they're going to extend the hip. This is like when we're standing up from a seated position. These muscles both contract. A really, really powerful muscle can lift your entire body weight easily. And then just the view on the right side just shows the deep muscles. There is a gluteus minimus. You don't have to know it. There's lots of other muscles that are attaching there that are going to assist the gluteus maximus, but it is the main muscle. Okay, then a complex set of muscles on the thigh. These muscles do a variety of jobs, and some of these you can see wholly and some you can see in part on the cadaver. So let's see, one that you can see in part is the iliopsoas. This is a muscle that only just peeks out in the dissection because it's actually kind of goes behind the abdominal cavity. It's a muscle that moves the leg from an extended position when you're walking and pulls it backwards. So a very important muscle for walking. Then superficially you can see the sartorius going from the iliac spine all the way down to the medial side. This is an abductor of the thigh. Okay, and assisting that is the tensor fascia lata, which is mostly visible from the lateral side, but has a very long fascia on the lateral side of the leg. Then underneath the sartorius, here mostly visible, are four muscles: the rectus femoris, vastus intermedius, vastus medialis, and vastus lateralis. These are the quadriceps. These muscles attach by the patellar tendon to the patella and then through the patellar ligament to the tibia. These extend the knee. So like when you're kicking a football or a soccer ball, this muscle contracts to make the knee quickly extend when you kick the ball. So it's a very important muscle, very large muscle that takes up a lot of the mass of the upper part of the thigh. These work together. The rectus femoris is the main one, but the others are assisting it. Then there's a series of muscles on the inside of the thigh. These are collectively referred to as groin muscles or adductors. And so you can just see them here: the pectineus, the adductor longus, the adductor magnus, and the gracilis. And so these adductors, we probably know them best as the groin muscles. And so when they say an athlete has injured his groin, those are the muscles that are damaged or hurting, and it makes it hard to pull the leg in. These all pull the leg toward the midline. Here's a shot of these groin or adductor muscles. You can see they're going from, a lot of them are going from the pubis, and then they're going to the inside of the femur. And so if you can't do these, you can't bring your leg in. So you'll have a very hard time turning or stabilizing your leg. Okay. Another kind of cutaway view here, a really nice one is the kind of the view from the posterior part. And this is one you're removing the gluteus maximus and the gluteus medius, some of the muscles from the side, and then this posterior view, you see three muscles that make up the posterior surface of the thigh. These are the hamstrings. The largest of these on the lateral part is the biceps femoris. And then on the medial part, you have the semitendinosus and the semimembranosus. These are antagonistic to the quadriceps. And so when the hamstrings contract, what they're doing is flexing the knee. So very important in running. These are really important for athletes. When an athlete has pulled his hamstring, what he's done, he's got an injury to one of these three muscles or more of them, and he's probably unable to run because when he contracts them, it hurts, and he may be kind of have an injury to one of these tendons. Okay, and then the lower part of the leg, you're going to have to know a couple muscles here. A couple of these are going to cause you to stand on your toes, the gastrocnemius and the soleus. These muscles help you extend the foot and so stand on your tiptoes. They're large muscles on the posterior surface of the tibia of the calf, but they can be seen from here in the front and the side view. These are going to attach by way of the tendon going to the calcaneus. We, in common language, that's the Achilles tendon or the calcaneal tendon. Okay, and then on the front part of the leg, you have these anterior compartment muscles. The most superficial of these and the biggest is the tibialis anterior. It's the antagonist to the gastrocnemius and the soleus, and so it pulls the foot. It flexes the foot or dorsiflex. So it's moving it dorsally. Okay, so those are the muscles we have to know. All right, we'll stop.